Good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is John Servos, and I'm the Director of Commercialization Education at Fast Forward Medical Innovation, also known as FFMI, for those of you calling in from outside of the university. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Before I introduce our speakers, I do have a few things that I would like to cover, including some technical housekeeping items. Please keep your microphone and video muted throughout the webinar to cut down any background noise and distraction. If you would like to ask a question today, please type it into the chat feature. If you don't want to type your question, you can submit an X to indicate that you would like to unmute your microphone and ask a question yourself. I will be monitoring the chat function, and we will address questions periodically during the presentation, and then again as a question and answer period. Please note that the presentation is being recorded, and we will share the recording and a PDF version of the slides with you. Today's webinar is titled Unique Considerations in the Clinical Utility of Medical Devices and Diagnostic Technologies. It is intended to provide a closer look at the development milestones and timelines for medical devices and diagnostics. It's provided by Fast Forward Medical Innovation, a unit of the University of Michigan Medical School Office of Research, where we help biomedical researchers accelerate innovations from idea to impact. There are 4 functions to FFMI. We provide education, such as this webinar, and additional courses to teach commercialization concepts. We have multiple funding opportunities that come with mentorship, a business development team to connect investigators with company partners, and then we provide these services to a state and nationwide network as part of an innovation hub. Today's webinar is the 4th of 7 that we are offering as part of a series. Broadly, the goal of that series is to outline and describe critical concepts related to commercialization, analyze unique paths to market, and appraise diverse models of academic and industry collaboration. You can see a full lineup of the remaining webinars here, as well as on our website, along with the recordings of the previous webinars. I'll note that the next webinar is Wednesday, August 5th, and will focus on funding for university-based translational research. A final note from me that you might find interesting is the FFMI Innovation Studio. This is similar to office hours for innovators who are working on the project, but we're going to enhance the experience by having you register in advance with a description of your innovation and some preliminary questions. That information will allow us to then invite appropriate experts from our network to give you the best advice for your project. More information and registration can also be found on our website, and the next studio is being offered on August 18th. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce our 3 speakers for today. We are first going to hear from Michelle Larkin, who serves as the Director of Commercialization Programs at FFMI. Michelle has extensive experience facilitating commercialization grant funding projects and providing mentorship in the technology planning and development process with academic inventors as well as outside companies. Prior to FFMI, she was a project manager with the University of Michigan Coulter Translational Research Partnership Program and a biomedical engineer with the U of M Pediatric Device Consortium. She also has experience working for multiple Ann Arbor-based startup companies that were spun out of U of M Technologies. Following Michelle, we'll hear from Robert Chisena. Robert is the co-founder, CEO, and CTO of Calcium Solutions. Robert is a postdoc research fellow at the University of Michigan, where his interests lie at the crossroads of business, technology, and patient care. Through his work with Calcium Solutions, he has helped acquire important seed funding from various sources, such as the Spark Business Accelerator, the Michigan Business Challenge, and the Rice Business Plan Competition. And along with Robert, we'll be hearing from Dr. Hitinder Gurm. Dr. Gurm is a professor of internal medicine and the Associate Chief Clinical Officer at the University of Michigan. He also is the co-founder and CMO of Calcium Solutions. Dr. Gurm's research interests include clinical quality improvement and the development of novel devices for endovascular interventions. He leads the Blue Cross Blue Shield Cardiovascular Consortium and is the project director for a multi-center quality improvement registry funded by the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. He has published more than 250 original articles and book chapters and has been named as the inventor on 4 patents. So thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us today. And at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Michelle to get things started.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Larkin, as John mentioned, and I'm the Director of Commercialization Programs at FFMI. And I'm going to be giving you today a brief introduction to medical device and diagnostic development, leaning heavily on some unique considerations related to clinical utility and the regulatory pathway as you develop your medical device or diagnostic technology. So let's get started. So let's look at this, brief overview of the medical device or diagnostic technical development pathway. And as you can see, this is portraying us a very linear process from discovery and ideation through prototyping, preclinical and clinical testing, ultimately leading us to a regulatory decision that would allow us to launch our product and sell it in the marketplace. And I think this is a bit idealistic and doesn't include a lot of non-technical things that we need to consider when we're moving our medical device or diagnostic technology forward. And where I want to focus our attention today specifically is on the unmet need identification and market assessment, as well as a regulatory assessment, and how both of those things are going to critically underpin our medical device and diagnostic development pathway. And other things that you'll want to consider along the way that I believe Dr. Gurm and Robert will address in their presentation is intellectual property, reimbursement, and other factors that really influence how you move your product forward. And of course, there's always a consideration of funding and how you move all of this stuff forward from a financial aspect as well. So if we take a look at how medical devices and diagnostics are classified in the United States from a regulatory perspective, they're classified based on risk. And they're placed into 3 different buckets, classes 1, 2, and 3. And each of these is an escalating risk to the patient. Class 1 being low risk, class 2 moderate, and class 3 high risk. And you can see a few examples here at the bottom of the slide of typical medical products and how they're classified by the FDA. And if we look at all of these medical products that are considered devices or diagnostics, they all have to be recognized by the FDA in some fashion before they're sold on the marketplace. And as we increase in risk to the patient, we increase in time from submission of our product to the FDA to its approval, the ultimate cost in gaining this approval, and the complexity of the process itself. So if we dig a little bit deeper into these class 1, 2, and 3 products, I've represented in this pie chart just the overall breakdown of the percentage of types of these devices on the marketplace. So the vast majority, almost 90%, are falling the class 1 or class 2 pathway. Class 1, as I mentioned, is the least amount of risk to the patient, has very little regulatory oversight, and nearly all of them are exempt from an approval from the FDA. More commonly is the class 2 devices. These pose a moderate amount of risk to the patient. They're subject to regulatory controls and a pre-market clearance process, most typically called a 510(k) process. Very few of these are exempt from FDA oversight. And of note, only about 10% require a clinical trial for approval. And I'll make a note about that later, but just keep that in mind. And then class 3 is a high risk to the patient. These are typically devices that are implanted, life-sustaining or life-saving. They require a full approval by the FDA in clinical trials to demonstrate their safety and efficacy. Where we'll focus our conversation today is on class 2 devices, mainly because that's typically where you're going to end up, or that's the typical pathway in which you probably will land with your particular idea. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So if we take a typical class 2 device, which would go through an FDA 510(k) clearance pathway, I believe these are people out of Stanford did a study a few years ago to assess kind of the time to market and overall cost to market for class 2 devices that have to go through the 510(k) pathway. And as you can see by these graphs, it takes on average about 6.5 years and $31 million to get to the point where you're selling your product on the marketplace through a 510(k) pathway. It's a lot of time and a lot of money. And a lot of that time and money, 60 to 80%, is spent doing things that the FDA wants you to do in order to be able to be clear to market your device and sell it. And so really up front, we need to understand from our device how the FDA is going to oversee it, and what testing and development we need to do so that we can get to this approval, because a lot of our time and effort is going to be spent there. And really what's driving that ultimately is what the product does. And so we really want to investigate early and often what our medical device or diagnostic actually does, what clinical utility and value add it provides for the user, in terms of, does the device fit into the existing workflow or the existing way that these types of devices are paid for? If your device fits into a specific surgical procedure, how is that procedure paid for, and how is your device going to be involved in that cost? If you're building a diagnostic tool, does it provide clinically actionable data? What are the physicians that are, or care providers that are using your diagnostic technology going to do with the output? And ultimately, what benefit are you providing to your end users, clinicians, hospitals, payers, that's going to drive them away from what they currently do to adopting what you're proposing? Are you providing them cost savings, improved outcomes at a similar or marginal cost, a new source of revenue? At the end of the day, we really need to understand, what does this medical device or diagnostic have to do to drive adoption by your end customers? And by defining what it actually has to do to be successful in the marketplace, that's going to help us identify what regulatory requirements we're going to have to fulfill. So if we're able to define what it has to do, we can translate that into some regulatory jargon called intended use and indications for use. So at a very basic level, intended use is, what does this technology do? For example, if it is a diagnostic tool that is going to take a picture of a mole on my arm and tell me either that looks suspicious, you should follow up with a dermatologist, or that is definitely a melanoma, or it's definitely not a melanoma. All three of those scenarios have different forms of risk associated with them. A moderate risk to me would be saying, that looks a little suspicious, you should follow up with your care provider. It's not providing me any form of definitive diagnosis. Of potential great risk to me is this diagnostic tool saying that is definitely not melanoma. It could be a potential false negative reading, and what if I do have melanoma? So we want to assess what this technology actually has to do, intended use, and that will help guide us from a regulatory perspective. And then secondarily, indications for use. Who is this used on? So in what treatment scenario or on what patient population is this being used on? Or who is it not being used on? The patient population itself sometimes can drive your regulatory decisions. For example, an adult versus a pediatric population. Pediatrics or pregnant women are vulnerable populations, and that may increase your risk profile. We want to develop an intended use and an indications for use statement. And then we want to figure out, based on the FDA's categorization of medical devices and diagnostics, what types of products are most similar to ours, and how are we going to use what they've already done to gain approval to drive our own development process. It's a bit of a paradox, I will admit, because all of you are here because you're developing new or novel or innovative medical devices and diagnostics, and yet the current standard for getting a clearance from the FDA is to say, I'm not quite so different, and I'm still as safe and effective as something that already exists. So we want to demonstrate that we're novel, but we're also not that novel from a safety and efficacy perspective. One way to do this is to go onto the FDA's website, identify these similar products, which are called predicate devices, and then each of these products that has been cleared by the FDA, there's a summary document available publicly online. I mean, you can review those, and they typically have some testing data, either from bench to preclinical to clinical, summaries available in there so you can get an idea of what's required. And then I mentioned this before, but in terms of clinical testing, if we're talking about class 2 devices, very few actually require, about 10%, a clinical study for clearance. But this is becoming increasingly important for market acceptance. So just because it isn't required from a regulatory standpoint, it may be required from your potential market audience, that you need to demonstrate safety or efficacy in a human to drive adoption from your end customer. Ultimately, a pre-submission meeting with the FDA will determine the need for this clinical study. The FDA is also not the only body that is involved in getting a clinical study approved. At each institution that a clinical study would be performed, there is an institutional review board that assesses the safety of clinical studies that are ongoing using new technology. And again, this is all based on risk. If the IRB determines that your study poses a significant risk to the patient or not, if they deem it does not, then you only have to go through the IRB to do the study. If they deem it does pose a significant risk, then you'll have to go through the FDA and the IRB to get approval to do the study. And if they're unsure, they will just go to the FDA and ask directly. So we focus primarily on the FDA and their role in regulating medical devices and diagnostics. And I just want to make a note about two different paths to market for diagnostic technologies, specifically in vitro diagnostics, IVDs, and laboratory developed tests, or LDTs. In vitro diagnostics are typically point of care applications, so point of care diagnostic, and these will go through the FDA, typically in a class 2 fashion. Excuse me. Laboratory developed tests, something that's going to be run in a dedicated facility. For example, a lot of the genetic screening that's being done, you send your sample out to a specific company, they analyze it and provide you with the results. That's an example of a laboratory developed test. Those are regulated under CLIA approval, which is overseen by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid and not by the FDA specifically. So just keep that in mind in terms of who your particular target audience is, how you're selling your product, and who's going to be the end user of it. Are you providing the lab services, or are you providing a technology that can do lab services elsewhere? So I'm going to wrap up. And as you have noticed, I talked a lot about the FDA. So the FDA is really going to underpin most of the development timeline and cost for your medical device or your diagnostic technology. So really determining upfront what it has to do and who it has to be used on. So intended use and indications for use will really lay out the foundation for the testing that's required. And doing that customer discovery early upfront and then often throughout the process of your development is going to help you define those intended use and indication for use statements so that you're constantly evaluating your regulatory position and how that's going to impact your development timeline. There are a few resources available for regulatory pathway help. One is the MISHAR IDE and IND Investigator Assistance Program at the University of Michigan. I've linked that here. And then the FDA also has either a standard set of guidance documents, which group related devices together and detail specific requirements based on the technology and application. And then you can also find those summary documents, as I mentioned, for specific devices available on their website. And for a broader look at this topic, medical device and diagnostic development as a whole, and further deep dive into the FDA regulations of medical devices, I've linked an escalating length of videos here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, I will conclude, and we can turn it over to our main speakers for today.
Great, thank you, Michelle. And maybe we'll entertain a question or two while we transition, if anybody has one. No?
So I guess there are no questions. This is Hitinder Gurm. I will share with you our journey from a clinical challenge to where we stand today with respect to getting our device commercialized. So Calcium Solutions is a company that I started with Robert Chisena. You can see Robert on Zoom. You cannot see me, but in a second, I'll show you my picture. I do exist. So I'm an interventional cardiologist, and I have a fairly busy practice. And I had a clinical challenge, which is fairly common in the cath lab, which is vessels that are heavily calcified. As we get older, our blood vessels get plaque, and over time, this plaque will either rupture and cause a heart attack, or it'll become calcified. And this calcium tends to be harder than bone, and that's a source of both frustration and nihilism. So you see a lot of calcium and you sort of walk away from it because our current methods of treatment are not ideal. And there's a growing need for it because patients are living longer due to our success of whatever else we are doing with medical therapy, and people are smoking less and so on. Robert, do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So first, I'd like to talk to you about concept generation, because that's obviously the most important issue. So this is an angiogram. So the left panel that you see are a series of panels. The first one where you see an arrow, there's a little bit of haziness there. And what you see there is a stent that has actually been placed inside a calcified plaque. And in the second, you can see that shadow. There is significant amount of like even without the contrast. So in the first picture, you see the contrast filling up the blood vessels. In the second one, you see a shadow that persists after the contrast is cleared away. And in the third panel, you see a balloon that has been inflated. The balloon has two markers in it. Those are like the dots at the end. And then in the center, it looks like it's not fully expanded. The technical term for this is a dog bone. So we interventionalists are very simple. They're the simplest of all physicians, so we like to give very simple names. So it's called a dog boning effect, and the cartoon at the top shows this. So we have calcified plaque, and the stent is not fully expanded. So when that happens, when a stent is not fully expanded, that sets it up for failure. Either stent will shut down and have what we call restenosis, in the sense it'll develop scar tissue, or it'll shut down totally, and a clot will form there, and that's how it shuts down that stent thrombosis. And that's what happened to this patient. So this patient had this complication, and in the sense that he came back 2 days after this procedure was done, and then had a heart attack, and the vessel is now occluded. So this patient survived, but had a significant decline in their heart function. So, you know, like I said, as an interventionalist, I was thinking about how can we treat this better? So our treatments currently include atherectomy, which is like a drill. But the other idea I had was, what if you take a hammer and tap away? So it's like a medically controlled hammer. So you see that in the cartoons at the top. So we have a balloon that's inflated at a low pressure, and then you inflate the balloon and cycle the pressure. So you are basically creating a controlled jackhammer. So Robert tells me I shouldn't use that term, but that's what I was looking for. So I wanted to create a term that is a medically controlled jackhammer. So at the bottom, we have a video, and you know, if you pay attention to that, you can see, Robert, can you run that again, please? So what you see here is a model or a plaque surrogate that is made of plaster of Paris. It's pretty thick, actually much thicker than what we have in a coronary. And you can see it break apart as the balloon cycles. So this was the challenge I was dealing with, and I wanted to figure out how to make this work. So this is not uncommon, actually. If I don't know if any one of you on the call is a physician, we have challenges that we want to fix, but most people are not very clear about how you go about doing it. And now this is a game that I've played before, not with much success because it's not over till it's over. But I've had some experience both within the university and outside in taking an idea and trying to convert it into a commercially viable solution. So the first thing you need, or at least I need in this, is a partner. So, so the partner I have is Albert Shih. So Albert Shih is a professor in mechanical engineering. He has a lab that is dedicated to device development. He has access to talent and resources. And he has access to a lot of the stuff that, as a physician, I do not. I have access to patients. I have access to data. I do not have access to benchtop or just brutal engineering, which is needed. But the most important thing Albert has access to is this guy on the other end of this panel, or other people like him. Now, they come in short supply. So you need someone who is a good engineer, because this is a difficult mix to find, right? You want someone who's a good engineer. That is a given, because what you're asking them is hardcore engineering. Second, they have to have a desire to take some risk, because the idea of taking a device from a concept to commercialization, there's a risk involved in that. And then they have to have the motivation to solve this and take on a journey. And then you have to have a guiding hand. You can see that in the picture. There's actually a hand on his shoulder. So you have to have a guiding hand that is going to guide you through. And that guiding hand can be your mentors and other resources that exist in the university. And it's very important to use those resources. So I cannot stress more the need to have a strong team, and then to have the you have to be able to ask for help and guidance, because there are tons of people across this institution, and then some where you need to step out of the institution, because if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, or you think this person or that team is not going to deliver what you need to step outside the university and reach out. Robert, you want to take it from here? Sure. And discuss the rest of our journey?
Absolutely. So thank you, Dr. Gurm. That was heartwarming. So from this point on, this was about maybe 2 or 3 years into my doctorate journey, when Dr. Gurm came to Professor Shih and had this concept and intended overview of a device for treating calcium. So I took that idea and we went on full concept generation. So everything from starting off with the basics, that is getting into the cath lab or into the hospital, getting all of your user needs from the physician, and Dr. Gurm being very gracious with his time, and finally not really being married to a single idea. So it takes a while to get to an elegant solution, a simple elegant solution. We probably went through 5 or 6 iterations before we came on the final concept. And to be honest, we're still in that concept generation phase where you're continuously producing new ideas, and that's kind of the beauty of the university, is you can do that without anybody looking over your shoulder. So on the screen here, you see some of the initial prototypes that we started to settle on. Very crude, but it got the job done. As Dr. Gurm mentioned, we wanted to oscillate the pressure in an angioplasty balloon at a high frequency and with high pressure gradients, and you can see some videos of that occurring. So the one in the middle, that's a brief initial prototype that we just saw success with, and we've taken it so much further from there. Another thing that was important was to demonstrate efficacy of the concept. That's always important. Physicians are science driven. They want to see efficacy inside of some sort of model. And the best model that we had at the time was a plaque surrogate. And you can see some of the efficacy here. This was supposed to be a slow-mo, but for some reason it sped up. But there were some limitations to the model, and in the next few slides here, I'll discuss some of the things that we did with help from the university to improve that model and to get better science that we could eventually present in a commercialization sense. After this concept generation, we settled on a design, and the most important thing you can do after that is make sure that concept is novel, and importantly, like, scout out the surrounding space. So intellectual property is probably one of the most important things that you can do as a medical device founder. And that ensures, having that intellectual property ensures that you can stand toe to toe with some of the bigger medical device manufacturers. So our goal is to pass this along to a larger company like a Boston Scientific, and without strong intellectual property, they'll figure out a way around your technology. So it's important as a developer of medical device technology to truly drive that IP strategy, knowing what the space is and how to carve out a space of your own. So on the bullet points, I won't necessarily go through each one, but it gives you some ideas and some of the things that I've learned over the course of several patents that we've published here. What each of the components of a patent include. So you have your patent description, your patent claims, dependent and independent, and in trying to set up a broad fence to keep competitors out. And one thing that I can highly recommend is work with your Office of Tech Transfer team to write the best patent possible. And every minute that you spend on that patent is going to be important, not just on your own, but searching the space and making sure that you're free and clear to operate later on. Another awesome, while we're on the topic of Office of Tech Transfer, another great topic or another great resource from Office of Tech Transfer is the mentor in residence. I have the engineering know-how. Dr. Gurm represents the medical know-how, but there was certainly a lack in business and commercialization understanding, and I think that this mentor in residence group that Office of Tech Transfer houses are fantastic for helping you go from the benchtop to an actual license or a spin-off. Other important resources that we found throughout our journey were funding sources, but such as FFMI and NCAI, which is NIH Center for Accelerated Innovations. This was programmed through the Cleveland Clinic. So these were all really critical resources that allowed success for us. So this brings us to the second phase, which is the prototyping and R&D, and really securing our concept and truly understanding its functionality. So I want to sort of outline it via the funding paths that we took and how we drove value through those funding milestones. So the first one that we started with was FFMI Kickstart, and a shout out to Sarah. She was fantastic during this part, and she really helped us key in on some of the most value-adding milestones that we could hit. So at that stage, we had a simple prototype that wasn't very pretty, and it needed some development and some additional work to be able to clinically test, or not clinically, but do benchtop safety and efficacy testing. And that's important, that science is important to be able to include in your overall message and story to your licensee or your eventual venture backers. So in this Kickstart grant, we were able to develop the device that you see on the right, which then allowed us to prepare for animal tests. An important part of this, if you're not familiar, is getting EQUIP approval for your particular animal study. So that was a significant learning experience and jump that we had to make. But this Kickstart grant got us prepared for that, for those animal studies. Then about 6 to 8 months later, we received our FFMI, MTRAC, and NCAI funding. And the most important value-driving milestones for those two grants were further refining the device past what you had seen in the previous slide to something that was much more like a medical device. And then actually running those animal studies and then the ex vivo efficacy studies. So doing some of the basic science and product development were the first two key strategies within these two grants. The last part was probably one of the most important, was the regulatory track that we took, and figuring out the plan behind dealing with the FDA. And this took about 75% of the time. So your regulatory path is extremely important, and alongside of your science and product development, it's probably up there with the most important things to do during commercialization. So that is going to be a significant part of the rest of the presentation, and it sort of rounds out the three phases. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is design controls, and design controls are essentially a checklist to take your technology from one where you have one single device on the bench to many, and ensuring that those many meet the same rigorous standards that one originally met, and to do it on a larger scale. So it's absolutely necessary when commercializing, and especially when dealing with the FDA. It's certainly a pain. So really what I recommend is hiring someone to work with you to do this properly. So there's many resources in Ann Arbor that can help you with this, or elsewhere. We use Into Being, which is a design firm in Saline. I thought that they were exceptional in their work. They helped us, go through a lot of these design controls, but also meeting with the FDA, which I'll discuss in a second, and getting through a lot of these regulatory phases. It's also a good idea to have somebody local so that you can sort of take your device there and physically show them that device. Again, this is going to take a long time to fully bake out, and increases in complexity with the complexity of your device. So you have to be the driver of this, but there's somebody in the background that's kind of guiding you through the whole process. The next logical step after design controls is preparing for your FDA pre-submission. So Michelle, a little while ago, was talking about the various classes of devices, and the various mechanisms for dealing with the FDA, and the pre-submission is just one of those tools that you have in interacting with the FDA. So the pre-submission acts as a stepping stone to get to your final clearance or approval. And it allows you to communicate with the FDA and get written correspondence, but also post-written correspondence, speak with them, and in fact, sometimes negotiate with them to get to the required or most optimal plan. So this pre-submission process starts with sending the FDA a pre-submission letter, which is a document that you send to the FDA to solicit their feedback on your device's regulatory path. It's very important for investors if that's the route that you plan to take, because it shows that you've spent the time to characterize your pathway and truly understand who's similar to you, who may be your predicate device, for if you're going down the 510K clearance route, and essentially what your testing plan will be. So what it is that they will be paying for. So I recommend being extremely thorough and in your preparation for this letter. So the FDA meeting, this pre-submission meeting, is an hour long, and I think that a reasonable amount of time that you should spend on this is about 80 hours to prepare for this, and send it and be confident in yourself, ensuring that the questions that you ask the FDA are appropriate ones. So in that document, you're going to include the science that you've done, the proposed testing plan, and the work that you've done thus far on demonstrating safety of your device, and then an analysis of similarities to your predicate device. So if you're planning on doing a 510K, you're going to pick a device that is similar to you, and demonstrate how the functionality of that device and the indication for use is similar. And then the probably the quintessential part of this letter is the questions that you ask the FDA. They shouldn't be what should I do to demonstrate safety. They should be I propose this plan. Does the FDA agree? And again, these are things that I didn't know to begin with, and it's just important to hire somebody to help you through this process. But again, you should be the driver if you want to see your device succeed in a timely fashion. So time is also an important thing on this. There's always a certain rush to get the device to market, but it's really important to also step back a second and recognize how much work needs to be done. So I'm going to pause there for a second and I'm going to ask if there's any questions or if there's feedback or anything along those lines.
While Robert's on pause, this is Hitinder Gurm. I'd like to echo what he just said. And this is probably one of the most important steps in your journey, is making sure that your FDA strategy is well thought out and your pre-sub meeting is something that you plan for as if your life depends on it. We spend more time on our pre-sub meeting than I usually do planning a complex procedure, because this is going to determine that you don't end up going down a path that is financially not viable. And also, are you going to run into challenges down the road that you have not anticipated?
So, John or Michelle, I'm not sure if there's any questions, but if not, I'll continue.
Hey, Robert, this is Dan Rubenstein. I actually did have one question for you. So you got some funding early on, and then when you reached this phase where you were preparing more for the FDA, did you get any external funding to support that? And can you put any estimate on just a range of about how much it might cost to go through a process like that?
Right. So actually, MTRAC and NCAI were critical to helping fund this part. So Into Being we had contracted Into Being to do some of our design control work. So a certain number of hours. Being a driver of that part of the technology development, it sort of freed up some time for the folks at Into Being to help us work towards a pre-sub letter, and just the amount of hours that you put into the design controls also can lead to what you're going to be submitting in your pre-sub. So they sort of go hand in hand. and therefore they're funded under the same the same mechanism.
Okay, thank you.
There's possibilities to do it on your own. If there's limited funding, there's some entities, I think like Greenlight Guru, that provide some strategic help that's a little less hands-on. It really depends on how much time you have and how much effort you want to put into these preparatory works. But it's in our experience, I think that having somebody, it's like an IP attorney. I mean, you don't sit there and write the claims. Otherwise, you're going to get taken to the dry cleaner. You pay for the attorney to write the claims, and you provide the material.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. So that brings us to the meeting. So the pre-sub meeting is the meeting with the FDA, which allows you to ask questions to the FDA based on their written feedback. So about 3 to 5 days before your intended meeting, they send you maybe a 20-page document that outlines their views on each of your testing plans. So given that it's 5 days before, and you're going to present a presentation in 5 days, you're going to be under the gun. So it was a fun little experience getting ready for that, and especially in COVID times when you can't go and meet with them in person. So there's a few options where during your 1 hour meeting, you can either go to Maryland and meet with the FDA in person. I think you can send them a letter back, or you can do a video chat with them. So the beauty of meeting with somebody is that you can demonstrate how safe your device is, that it's not scary, it's not going to blow somebody up. So that was a little bit of the challenge that we faced during this meeting, and what was extremely helpful was a video, I believe, in getting them to feel and see and get an understanding of what the device is like. It wasn't nearly as good as touching and feeling it, but the video provided some background and extremely helpful knowledge to them to get them familiar with it. So again, it's the meeting is an hour long, so making sure that your entire team is on board is critical. So having someone MC the meeting and be familiar with that person should be familiar with the FDA and the lingo that they speak, and ultimately can converse with them in a relaxing setting, so that they're open for updating their views. Then somebody that's an expert in presenting clinical data or the clinical experience. In this case, it was Dr. Gurm. And then someone that's knowledgeable on the technical side. In this case, it was myself. If necessary, a statistician, and then someone to take meeting minutes. So those meeting minutes are going to be a document that describe what conclusions were come to during the meeting, and you send them to the FDA, and the FDA will sign off on them or request some changes. So in our first meeting, to give you a little bit of an anecdotal experience, we had this 1 hour long meeting, and some of the goals that we were trying to achieve were further clarity on the intended animal study. So for instance, they wanted us to go head to head with a competitor, and that just wasn't a viable approach. It wasn't least burdensome, and then some benchtop study issues that we had. So it's important to go into this meeting with a clear mind to know what it is that you want to get out of that short 1 hour meeting. So, as always, just be cordial. There are people on the other end, and they're trying to make sure that your device is safe. And sometimes it does take a little explaining to ensure that they understand what is going on the other end, and to have them or to explain to them where their misconceptions might lie. Another important thing is to sort of make sure everybody knows when to speak and where to speak. It can be distracting, especially on a video call, if you're speaking over each other and you end up not getting what you want. So making sure everybody knows what their role is extremely critical. So the last step in this journey, and one that we're currently in, so I can let you know how it goes. So it's spinning out of U of M or the university that you're at, and starting your company. There's other routes, but we'll give you a little bit of an idea of what ours has been. So we started Calcium Solutions in August of 2019. Most important thing is a lawyer. You need to make things clean and attractive for an investor. You want to make sure that everybody is doing their part, and that entails making sure that not every person that was involved in development needs to be on the company. So maybe some difficult conversations, but it's important that everybody that is entailed with the company or is part of the company is pushing. It's a difficult, long journey, and you don't want to get bogged down with folks that aren't performing. We found some outside resources, especially in Ann Arbor, that were extremely helpful. So Spark has some commercialization funds that act as sort of economic development for the town, and these helped us, pay for the setup of the company. The Zell-Lurie Institute is an institute at the business school. They've been extremely helpful in getting to where we are. We participated in some of their business plan competitions, and we were able to get some additional non-dilutive funding that eventually went into the company. Other places to get money and resources, SBIR and STTRs. We didn't have a whole lot of luck with STTR, but it is a good mechanism for funding if you can get it. An entity to work with is BBC. They're extremely helpful, and they're good at what they do. They'll certainly push you to write a good STTR. Venture capital and friends and family are other mechanisms for funding your company, and also less common in medical devices, but bootstrapping and trying to get as much done with as little money as possible. So moving into the takeaways, just tried to document as many of the things that I thought were critical and in the journey. The biggest on the technology and the product development side is figuring out what it is that you have to do. I mean, there's you can if you're interested in commercializing and taking a device to market, you can write papers until you're blue in the face, but really the most important thing is figuring out exactly what the end user is going to want, and that means getting out of your space and your comfort zone and going to speak to others that would have a potential interest in your technology. In our case, safety via animal studies, efficacy, and on cadaver studies, and then ultimately a good regulatory path. Another one is, again, what's the minimal team necessary to drive your technology, both when you're doing your technology development at the university and also in your company phase. The third one is a little derivative from location. Intellectual property is extremely important. it's going to be the value if you decide to either license or commercialize through a company. It's going to be the value of that company and nothing else. It's important to build connections outside the university. There's a lot of resources inside the university, but it's also important to get backers and cheerleaders outside that can help introduce you to to helpful resources that you may not have here. Again, we love to do science here at the university. I'm the first one to say it. It's extremely exciting. But you also have to kind of dig in to your product development strategy. That includes documenting your design controls, your checklist, and then going down the regulatory path and truly understanding that so that an investor will know how to get this on the market with you. So this is a long journey. I think this is like the third year or so that Dr. Gurm and she and I have been working at this, and we've recently have more folks involved. It's important not to be greedy. I mean, it takes so much effort and so many people to get this successful, and making sure that everybody has a good stake and is really motivated to keep moving is extremely important. And the last thing is just have a good time. I mean, I think Dr. Gurm and I built up a really good relationship, and I think without that relationship, it would have been hard to succeed. I mean, he's been an extremely good mentor to me. But I also see him as more than that, as a friend, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. So that's the last of it, and I'll let Dr. Gurm make any final statements. But thank you all for listening.
So thanks, Robert, and of course we will do it again. This is not the first, and this will definitely not be the last. So I think Robert's done a fairly thorough job of going over what we found were helpful to us. And there's one other aspect, which is the team is very important, but everyone has to win. I think one of the mistakes I've seen with some of my colleagues who had ideas, that people become too, like they believe that they should have a majority or an overwhelming majority of the win. And that, if not everyone's vested in success and not everyone's gonna win, then the team is going to fail. And so that's very important, that everyone who's on the team should be someone who brings value. Not everyone who's participated in somewhere along the way needs to be on the team. And you have to be clear about that. And my belief is that, you need like one or two people who are going to have bulk of the company early on, and then they will be vested in making it a success. That way it's not diluted out, and then people just move away and the project sort of flounders. And it's a company. It is not a research project. I think that's another thing. We love doing science. It's very easy to go down a path of teasing something that is just scientific curiosity, but nobody cares about from a commercialization aspect. And you have to take a step back and say, okay, that is science and this is commercialization. And you can do both, but you got to be focused on the commercialization aspect if you're going to make a company. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gurm and Robert, for sharing your story. It was an excellent presentation. There's a question here that asks about discussion around reimbursement or monetizing, and how that discussion and that strategy may have affected your development path.
So I'll take that. I think it's very important to know how your device is going to get paid. And one of the early consultants that we brought in was somebody who's an expert in new device payments and reimbursement. So it's very important to understand how a new device is going to get paid, what is out there, what is coming down the pipeline, new codes that we thought were going to happen and they just got released that might actually apply to our device. But at the time when we were doing this 2 years ago, we had no idea whether that would happen or not. But understanding what if we go down a code X versus a code Y, and how would that translate into payment? Because if a device is paid for, it has a different valuation versus a device that is not paid for. Both of them are important, but obviously a device for which there is a clear payment is a device that is much more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's also some implications with the regulatory path that you take. So, for instance, there's a new mechanism that the FDA, I think in the last few years has pushed through, which is the breakthrough designation. And if you receive the breakthrough designation, not only do you get on the FDA's quick list in terms of responses, but later on down the road, when you're vying for CMS coverage and additional codes, you can get technology add-on payments. So it is a really complex world. I still don't really have a huge grasp on it, but we recommend working with somebody that does if that's a key value driver in your company or your product.
Great, thank you. I don't see any additional questions, and it is 2 minutes past the hour. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up? I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much to both of you and to Michelle for joining us this afternoon. Like I said, it was an excellent presentation, very informative. So thank you again. And thank you to everybody who joined on the call. We hope to see you at the next webinar in August. Thanks again and have a great day.
Take care.